This Week in Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick. From Microbe TV, this is TWiV, This Week in Virology, a special episode recorded on February 27th, 2020. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you're listening to the podcast all about viruses. Today we're recording in Bethesda, Maryland. And joining me here, my co-host, Rich Condit.
Hello, Vincent. Good
back
to
on
be
the
back.
road.
Another road trip. Love it.
So it's Thursday, and this is the first of 3 interviews that we have planned. And Rich is with me for all 3. And for this first one, we are at the home of a distinguished, seminal, amazing virologist. He is Fred Murphy. Welcome to TWiV.
Thank you.
And you have a title, which is Professor Emeritus, University of Texas Medical Branch, Galveston.
Yes.
Because that's the last place you were at, right?
Yeah, I'm also Emeritus Professor and Emeritus Dean, University of California, Davis.
Okay.
School of Vet Medicine.
So you're a veterinarian.
I am. Not a real one, though.
So you're not a real one?
I mean, I've never practiced.
So you have a DVM, right?
Yes.
And a PhD.
Yes.
Do you have an MD as well?
Honorary.
That's right. You have a lot of honorary degrees after your name there. Anyway, it's a real honor to be here in your house, and we have been meaning for a long time to come and talk to you about viruses.
Well, thanks for coming. I'm a great fan of TWiV.
Glad to hear it. And we have a lot to talk about.
By the way, Vincent, I just have to do one thing,
Yes.
or the crowd's going to complain. It's 42 degrees Fahrenheit out, and breezy and sunny.
Pretty nice.
It's pretty nice. Not bad.
Is that kind of weather conducive to respiratory virus transmission?
I don't know. You tell me.
I think it's in the middle.
Yeah.
I think maybe if we were in the 50s and 60s. But what brought you to... I'm going to go through your history, which will take us probably a day.
Yeah, I would advise not doing that.
What brought you to Bethesda?
I have 4 sons, 2 of whom live nearby.
Okay.
So,
Family always does that. Did it with Rich,
Yeah.
right?
yes.
Where do the others live?
One in Atlanta and one in Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
Ooh. Oh, nice
Because
place.
Rich and I were just in Galveston in when? November, October, September, or in the fall.
Yeah.
And it seemed like that would be a good place to retire, right?
I had a half-time appointment, so
You were there
for 10 years. So
10 years, okay.
I agree.
In fact, from our brief time there, which was 2 days, it seemed wouldn't be conducive to working, actually. It's too nice, right?
Most in the summer it's too hot to go outside, so that's working time.
Yeah, okay. Before we talk about you, I just wanted to get your thoughts on SARS coronavirus 2. Have you been following it?
Well, except that not sure what name to use, but I have been following it closely. I'm from the era when coronaviruses were fairly harmless.
Yeah.
I did work with 229E back in the day, and it's just another respiratory virus.
Yeah. Pretty mild infections, right?
Right. And then, but I've always spent all of my lab life working with really bad bugs. So I favor the SARS, MERS, and the new one.
So were you involved at all in SARS and MERS?
No, that's after my time.
After your time, okay. So just give us a professional opinion. You think a good fraction of the population is infected with the mild coronaviruses,
Right.
229 and HK something, right? I think
There's like 6 of them.
6 of them. Do you think they would confer any, or if partial immunity to some of these newer SARS, MERS, and the new one?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because a lot of people are asking us that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know because the new virus is so new.
Yeah, and they, there are these divisions within the corona family that where these pathogens are in different genera, so they're not likely to cross-protect.
Yeah.
So, with respect to the transmissibility of this virus and its current sort of emergence, apparently globally,
Yes.
and a relatively, and I use that word precisely, a relatively high case fatality rate from what we know already.
Right.
I kind of feel like within my experience, we're in new territory. I've not seen something quite like this in my lifetime, but you probably have a lot more perspective.
Well, I'm not old enough to have been in the 1918
Right, but that's the first thing that comes to mind, is 1918.
That was the mortality rate at that time, about 2.5%.
Yeah, that's right. Very transmissible. Yeah.
But this, I mean, we don't know what's going to ultimately happen. With
My experience with it, I did work with mouse hepatitis virus, and it grows like hell. I mean, the yield, it's. I think the ancient coronas were enteric because enteric viruses have high titer shedding to complete the cycle, and there actually is one of the pig viruses that started out as a global problem enterically and switched to respiratory.
Yeah,
so I think anything's possible.
There's a more recent pig coronavirus. We talked about this on TWiV. It's called SADS, Severe Acute Diarrhea Syndrome coronavirus, which just emerged in China. And it's an enteric virus. And the bats from where theyese coronas come from they're enteric viruses, so they're used to growing at high titer. I think we don't actually have the right case fatality ratio.
I agree with that.
Right.
I think it's too high because we don't actually know all the people that have been infected.
That's the case with 1918 flu also.
Yeah. And H5N1 influenza, we really don't know the denominator.
Right.
And so it looks high, but it could actually be, I would guess we're tenfold underestimating the COVID-2 infections, which would bring that.
At least, yeah.
And then, of course, if you look by age, young people don't die typically from the new corona. So it's really not fair to say it's 2.5%.
Right.
Right.
And if diagnostically we're using a PCR to look for nucleic acid, we're still not addressing humoral immunity antibody levels, which is usually the usual
That's the way you do
population studies.
So I assume after the epidemic, we'll do some of those and see at a population level who's seropositive or not, and we'll get a much better picture.
That's right.
That's the way you did it in the old days.
That's right.
So there's something to be said about old technology.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, for example, someone could come in with a respiratory syndrome. They do PCR, it's positive, but it could be a false positive, or it could be they have something else, but it just turned positive for corona, right?
Well, any assay where it has to be, current is, the dipstick tests in your doctor's office are antigen detectors. So for flu and other respiratory viruses.
That's right. That's right.
So they only tell whether you've got it now, not whether you've seen it sometime.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's still a big improvement over the way, where a diagnosis was so vague.
So I don't know when we're going to release this, but I thought we'd talk a little bit because people, in the midst of an outbreak, people like to hear about the outbreak and not other things.
And it's good to get perspective from somebody who's dealt with outbreaks.
Yeah, exactly. So it's important. Oh, one more SARS coronavirus question. I get the impression that we could have avoided all this if we had drugs or vaccines available. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the vaccine system, is based on corporate profits. It's just not going to work. And we just don't have the public will to have a public vaccine system. We tried that once. There was led by the Army. There was a vaccine factory up in Pennsylvania that made vaccines. The Army's adenovirus vaccines were made publicly. That's a long time ago, and it all failed.
It's unfortunate because I think that is the way we should go. We should have public vaccines, not corporate to have
That's socialism, Vincent.
the health of the country in the hands of profits, does that make any sense?
No, not for this. No.
So if we keep thinking like that, we're always going to have these outbreaks.
That's right.
Right?
And it's not like I don't want to give the impression that that there's big bucks for the pharmaceutical companies in vaccines. In fact, just the opposite, which is why
that's
why there's a problem. I mean,
there's examples of it.
Break even or lose money. You know.
Yeah, there's examples where things. The new Ebola vaccine is made by Merck and Glaxo and the two vaccines on contract basis with what? It's all NIH money. And it's working.
Right.
As you know, those were originally developed for the Army to protect against bioterrorism. They were developed 15 years ago.
That's right.
And only because we had a huge outbreak did they go further.
Yeah,
in West
that's
Africa.
right.
But it's not a bad model to have NIH fund development.
Yeah.
I taught when I was in Singapore in December. Do you know Lin Fo Wang?
No.
He was. He's a bat guy. He studies bat viruses. He's there, and he knows the Nipah guy who discovered it, who's in your book. Why did I say this now? Singapore. Oh, I interviewed a guy who's the CEO of a nonprofit called CEPI. Have you heard of this?
Yes, yeah.
So he raises money to fund vaccine development where the companies won't touch it.
Right.
And he brings it to a point where it's ready for clinical trials.
Is that Larry Brilliant?
No.
He does that also. But,
He does that, yeah. This is another guy, and I that's a TWiV that'll be out at some point also. But I think that's a good model to get it to the point where, and they're doing a Nipah vaccine because the market is too small, right?
Yeah.
They have not many cases a year, so they will bring it to a point where next time there's an outbreak, maybe you could do a clinical trial and then use it in compassionate use. I think that's a great model for this.
I mean, we've had lessons where even the most conservative strategy of vaccine development, has gone bad. RSV vaccine, for example.
Yes.
So you really do have to go through called the Valley of Death from phase one to
That's great.
beyond.
I like that. I think my message is to people who get scared about the new corona or any new virus, tell your politicians to fund vaccine development ahead of time before it's too late. Or antivirals. We could actually have broadly acting antivirals that would hit almost any virus, right? All the corona polymerases are very similar.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you could have a pan-corona.
Well, the drug that was already used on an emergency basis is a protease inhibitor. But
it's an HIV protease inhibitor, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So, but I don't, I'm not, it's hard to generalize what the next one can be, a virus that doesn't have the same set of helicases and proteases and whatnot.
Yeah, that's true. But at least we know, as long as China has live meat markets, that we're going to have bat viruses coming into people.
That's right.
Mostly coronaviruses. So anyway, so let's talk about you, Fred. Let's start at the beginning. Now you're from Queens, which is cool because so is my wife. And you have, but you don't have any accent left. She has.
Is that right?
An accent. Yeah, that's because you went to the southern states and it got mixed up.
Oh yeah, I've never been back.
So when you were very young, were you interested in science?
I don't think so.
What did your parents do?
My father was a welder for Con Edison.
Cool.
Mother was a housewife. So, but
you got sibs?
Two sisters. Yeah.
Okay. Not scientists?
Pardon me? No.
Okay.
But I think my father wanted me to, do better. I was born in the bottom of the recession of the Great Depression.
The 30s, right? Yeah.
So we had no money, so I went to ag school at Cornell. But
so that was state supported?
Yeah. It was zero tuition. I just had, and I had a New York State scholarship.
And did you know when you went to Cornell that you were interested in science?
No, but I don't remember exactly why I picked microbiology as my major, because I think someone said it was the hardest major. I think maybe that was it.
What year is this now?
What?
Cornell.
52.
Okay.
I spent 7 years at Cornell.
I
went to vet school too.
I went to Cornell also.
I know.
Not in 52.
No.
I was born in 53, so I couldn't. I went in 1970. So tell me some professors. Who did you? It can't have been the same as me because it would be too many years later.
In microbiology?
Yeah.
Van der Mark.
Yeah, I know the name, but I never.
He was my counselor.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to blank on it.
Yeah, it's okay.
I think
So 7 years. So that's an undergraduate degree and a veterinary degree. Is that right?
Right.
So what inspired the veterinary degree?
I think it was a course in pathogenic microbiology that was which included viruses, because the micro department at Cornell did not do viruses at all, and so the 3 professors from the vet school taught the course, and it was really good, really good.
That stimulated an interest in viruses?
Well, maybe just more microbiology.
Okay.
And then I think when I got into vet school, it was that they were going to allow one nerd into the class, who was not going to practice. So there were a lot of jokes, that Murphy will, that tell you all about this pneumonia in this cow, and I had no idea.
So you didn't want to practice veterinary medicine.
When I finished, I was drafted the next day.
So when you went into vet school, did you anticipate that you might actually be a practicing veterinarian?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But then you got drafted. So what year is that?
59. It was Cold War time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's even post-Korea, is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Where did you get posted?
At Fort Sam Houston, Texas, at Fourth Army Lab, which actually had a virology section that had been built by Theodore Puck's son.
Yeah, Puck. Remember that name?
Puck, cell culture guy.
Yeah, cell culture.
And so the facility was nice.
So is Fort Sam Houston, is that in Houston?
San Antonio.
San Antonio, okay.
Historic place.
So you went there as an Army veterinarian?
Yep.
Okay. So what's your job when you're an Army veterinarian?
I had 2 jobs. One was there was a food chemistry lab, which was run by civilians, and I just had to sign papers for millions of dollars worth of food products coming in that the Army was buying. And then the other half was where I spent my time, and my most memorable lessons, because I was really just learning, was rabies. Mm-hmm. That we were the first lab outside of CDC Atlanta to have the fluorescent antibody test, which had just been, it was still being proven by comparative comparison with mouse inoculation and things like that. So we did massive comparisons, but our part of that was quite important because there was so much rabies in the area.
In dogs, right?
Yeah, dogs and coyotes.
Coyotes.
The fluorescent antibody test, is that actually a histochemical test? Or
no, it's immuno.
Yeah, but I mean,
chemical.
are you staining sections?
No, just
tissue?
smears. Smears of brain.
Smears of brain, and looking for some sort of general fluorescence. Is that right?
Well, rabies fluorescence is punctate, and because big lumps are negri bodies, and little dots you can't see by.
So you're not looking at intact cells or something. You're getting.
Well, you get some neurons would lay out on the touch impression.
Okay.
I just told my class about negri bodies on Wednesday because they're factories.
Yeah.
Like the vaccinia factories, right there, where the virus is assembling, right? So
they're masked RNP.
Yeah, they're RNP. That's exactly right. You know Tom Kizak, right?
Very well.
He was also an Army vet.
That's right.
Remember, we asked him, why does an Army need a vet?
I was thinking we'd had this conversation before, and he'd had the same thing about screening food products and that kind of stuff.
You know, his answer to another of your questions, I thought was the highlight of the day for me. You know, that he is a heroic guy. What he's done with Nipah and others.
Is he your generation, more or less?
No.
He's a bit younger?
Much
younger? Okay. All right.
Probably 20 years.
No, I didn't know that. You look young.
I'm 85.
Yeah, you don't look 85. You don't talk it either. It's good.
Oh. I'll finish my Army lesson because I have never thought that I was just indebted to a mentor. I was indebted to a work experience that gave me responsibility. Mm-hmm. And when I we only did human exposure rabies. So when it was positive, and there were a lot of them, I'm on the phone practicing medicine without a license because I had to tell Army physicians, what to do. And including one episode that is in my family memoir of a dog biting 27 people on the quadrangle of Fort Bliss in El Paso. And the head was sent to me by Army airplane, and it was really positive.
So at that time, was there a rabies vaccine that could be used prophylactically?
Post-exposure prophylaxis.
Yeah. Right, okay.
And pretty good.
Great. So you saved some lives. That's good.
Well, no one died, yeah.
They were vaccinated, all these 27?
Yeah. And plus, a bunch of others, too. That's the way it works.
Wow.
People who think they were exposed.
Yeah.
So how long were you at Fort Sam Houston?
2 years.
Just 2 years. It's a concentrated 2 years.
And then, but the highlight of that time is I met my wife. That's the greatest thing that ever happened.
So how old would you have been during that time?
25. So.
Wow.
And you got married before you left the fort?
Yeah.
Okay. Where'd you go next?
University of California, Davis for a PhD.
So during these years at Sam Houston, you decided you wanted to do science?
Well, no, it was as I got out of the Army, I took Irene, she's from Texas, to New York. And we're driving, on the Belt Parkway or somewhere, and I did not believe that I could have her move to Long Island. And so we took a month to commiserate over what to do and got in the car and went to California.
You drove?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Wow.
So this would have been what year?
61.
61. So Davis, California in 1961 is not too different than Texas.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
It was Cowtown. Yeah, it was small town.
A lot of wide open spaces.
Yeah.
Hot ranches, that kind of stuff.
And Davis was a small.
Yeah. Right.
It had started out as sort of Berkeley's farm, sort of.
Right. Right. And it was primarily an ag school, is that right? Or, it's the University of California, but of ag focus.
It was an ag school, and, it was the land grant school, so it had a lot of engineering and a vet school. And, the vet school was already looking to surpass the Eastern schools.
And so what inspired getting a PhD?
Well, it's the union card for a veterinarian.
That's right. That's right. I should know this because I've trained several vet PhDs. Yes.
Yeah. A physician can get away without a PhD, but a vet can't.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Okay. So how long were you there?
3 years.
What was the thesis on?
Immunoglobulins of cattle.
Okay.
I started out as an immunochemist.
So during this time, do you have a lingering interest in viruses?
Well, by that time, I was kind of the rabies expert around there.
Okay.
And, there's a lot of rabies in California at that time, too.
Okay. Good.
And, most of the grad school students in a vet school are older. They've done something. Mm-hmm. So it was a very a very maturing environment also.
Good.
I'm just curious if today a vet who wants to do research, will they get a PhD or
Yeah.
they still will?
Yeah.
So vet school does not teach you how to do research at all, just like med school doesn't teach you, right? For
Well,
medicine,
PhD only teaches you a little.
yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you want to get, if you have any interest in academics and you're a vet, you need a PhD.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Of course, MDs, they can do a fellowship, research fellowship, and not get a PhD and do research. But that's not open to vets generally. There's no such thing.
Well, they do it, except that it's a mistake, because you'll end up looking for a job against somebody who has
I
a
see.
PhD.
I got it.
You never get the job.
All right, so in Davis, you did not really pursue microbiological work, mostly immunoglobulin chemistry, right?
Well, but my thesis, I was a PhD in comparative pathology, so I did a lot of pathology, and the highlight of my virus life then was that 3 of us took Virology 101 at Berkeley. Mm-hmm. We drove a state car down 3 days a week. There was no traffic.
What's that? Like about a 3-hour drive?
No, it was an hour then.
Oh, just an hour? Okay.
Maybe today.
And the course was taught by Gunther Stent and,
oh my gosh.
Wow.
and Harry Rubin.
Oh my gosh.
And
That's
it almost
amazing.
killed us, It
was
so
hard?
Hard. It was great. Best course I've ever had.
It's 2 good teachers.
Well, virology in the 60s would be quite different than it is today.
Yeah.
That building, as a taking basic course, which was really demanding. We spent the whole afternoon after every lecture in the library figuring out what we really heard. And but upstairs in that building, it was Cold Spring Harbor West,
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. All right, so we leave Davis.
We're not going to get anywhere here.
It's okay.
No, this is great.
This is good stuff. Where'd you go next? Let's take a sip here, and you can tell us. Today, Davis has a lot of good virology, right?
Not enough.
No, but there's some plant virologists there.
Oh yeah, George Bruning has had a huge NSF center there on. It's all plant virology, another world.
One of my Pox acquaintances is there. Stefan Rothenberg.
Okay.
Yeah, he moved there recently.
There is a speaker at ASV this summer who is a plant virologist from Davis, a tall guy. Let's see if I can find his name here. I'm looking up the scientific program. Here we go. Bryce Falk. Doesn't ring a bell?
No, it's a lot of years in between.
Okay, it's okay. You're forgiven. Yeah, Bryce Falk. Okay, so we leave Davis. Where do we go next?
I was just finishing up my thesis, and I got a phone call from Telford Work at CDC. And in the course of a 10-minute phone call, he offered me a job, and I took it with no visit, no interview.
Doesn't happen anymore.
No.
Doesn't happen. I think this is the way it should be. You want someone, you call him
but
up?
I don't know how he knew who I.
I was going to ask you that.
No, I don't know.
Maybe
There was a professor of, sort of the public health side of infectious diseases, who may have, but I never knew.
Have you published any papers at this point in your career?
My thesis work was like 7 or 8 papers, but
maybe he saw those. Yeah.
I don't think.
What were you hired to do at CDC?
Well, I was the only guy ever to be hired as a branch chief right off the bat.
What branch?
It was viral pathology.
Okay. The rabies thing must be a part of this.
Maybe there's a lot I don't know, but but it was incredible.
10-minute phone call.
Yeah.
And you took the job.
The hardest part that day was going home and telling Irene we're going to Atlanta. Atlanta did not have a good reputation back then.
Did you have to convince her, or was she okay with it?
She was a trooper.
Okay. So branch chief, you go to Atlanta, you go to CDC.
I had a huge amount of money to buy what happened is a lot of the people who were doing pathological sorts of virology were taken away to build a hepatitis unit, which was a terrible thing for them because before hepatitis virology got cracked open, people did all kinds of the usual things and got nowhere. And that's what happened to them. So I had enough money to buy any piece of equipment I wanted. Telford Work gave me an electron microscope that he bought but didn't know how to didn't take it out of the box. So that's how it all started.
So how long were you there?
That time, the first time was 14 years.
Okay, so this is a real job.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And this is back when the young physicians who were avoiding Vietnam by joining the public health service were real part of the fabric.
Okay, so some of them
my
were
first
posted
fellow
to
was Marty
CDC.
Hirsch.
Wow.
My second was Tom Moneth and Bernie Fields. Bernie Fields' first paper is Murphy and Fields.
Wow.
And
This is great.
a bunch of other really good people.
I was going to ask who you trained, and it's quite amazing.
Well, they trained me.
Tom Moneth, is he about your age?
No, he's a little younger.
A little younger. It's another one we have to do. I've never met Tom.
Oh,
but I've heard so many great things.
he's a wise man too.
So he's been involved with vaccines not lately, right?
Yeah.
At the company, did he start? What's the name of it?
One Health?
It's been several companies.
Is that the One Health thing?
Yeah, but that's just his hobby, though.
Right.
I mean, it's mostly venture capital. But he's still the world's greatest authority on yellow fever.
He was a Sanofi Pasteur. Okay, he's instrumental in the dengue vax thing.
He's currently New Link Genetics, which is the company that started the Ebola vaccine in Canada, I think it was. But this must be old here, but that's one of the things he did. I'm trying to think of that small company that he started.
Well, some of us, I've always been shocked by him leaving us, when he went to the corporate world.
Yeah. And so what kind of things did you work on while you were... I'm sorry. A Canvas, that's the company.
Yeah.
Because they made the
smallpox
They
vaccine.
made the next generation smallpox vaccine.
And they also used yellow fever backbone to make some other vaccines, right?
Right, which have sort of never...
They didn't go anywhere, right?
Yeah. Except
the dengue.
if it wasn't a coronavirus, the other great threat, of course, are flaviviruses. There's so many of them.
Yeah.
Zika and West Nile.
Okay, a Canvas, that's the one I heard him talk recently at a...
He would be a lot of, he's spent a lot of time in Africa, and he's got some great war stories.
The vertebrate host, the reservoir for Lassa.
Yep,
is that right?
Mastomes.
Yeah. I mean,
field work, man. These guys in Galveston were telling us it's all about field work, which nobody wants to do anymore. Very few people want to do, right?
I think more people want to do it than can find money.
Yeah, that's right.
And the other thing is Americans are not as welcome in a lot of these interesting places as what used to be the case.
That's a good point.
Isn't that interesting?
We didn't hear that in Texas, but I would not doubt that. Yeah, I could see that because people used to go freely and bring back stuff all the time, right? Yeah. Well, now, as you know, it's more like going somewhere and establish capabilities there, right?
Yeah, that's different. That's a different life. Yeah.
It is. So, did anything happen while you were there? Any big outbreaks? It's 60s, only Lassa, right?
No, from the day I got there, there were, there was St. Louis encephalitis in Dallas, Memphis, Tampa Bay. These were, 500 cases, lots of mortality. Mm-hmm. And those first ones were all mosquito borne, so the vector guys are important. So that But there were other.
Did you interface with the EIS, the Epidemiologic Intelligence Service?
Well, in the earliest days, there was actually real animosity between the two because the CDC epidemiologists were taught that labs didn't matter. You know, that you go out and you do a case control study, and that it took years to break that down. The guy who broke that down was Walter Dowdle, who is also one of the great guys. He integrated epidemiology and laboratory sciences.
So during this 14-year stint at CDC, obviously you had a lot of administrative responsibility. But
no, it was just this unit, you know.
Okay, how big's the unit, personnel-wise, or professionals?
Probably got up to 8 or 9.
Oh, okay, so not too big.
Right.
And so you had a lot of time for your own lab?
Oh, that's all I did every day. Yeah.
Okay.
I spent half my life in an EM room in the dark room next to it.
So that was what was your focus in the lab during that time?
I did a lot of electron microscopy and a lot of immunofluorescence and pathology, and a lot of some histopath. I'm a pathologist with a small p, but because if you gave me wanted to know something about a cancer or any other pathology, I know nothing.
So
it's okay with us, right?
Had you done any electron microscopy before getting to CDC?
No.
You taught yourself.
Did you teach yourself?
Well, I hired a woman. At that time, people said you had to have someone, a professional, to align the column and all, and that was all changing. And then there was another woman who was given to me, and she turned out to be a scientist without a PhD, and she ended up probably with 100 papers. So it was a good group.
So there's a website we'll mention later which is hosted at Galveston, where you have a lot of EM images. Those are mainly ones you took during this period?
All of them.
All by you. And I mean, you got polio in there, you have all kinds of...
Well, that great polio picture, the negative stain one, is by Joe Esposito, since deceased. And I was teaching him how to do negative stain that day. And it came out just perfectly, so I probably
look at that.
Yeah, that
great stuff.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Is this a cell culture stain? So it's just high titer cell culture. It's amazing. But look at this. We got rabies, Lassa, lacrosse.
We'll get to this, but
Marburg.
A lot of our lay people will be familiar with this. That iconic Ebola picture.
So you took that.
Oh yeah, that's on my tombstone.
Is that true?
No, I don't have a tombstone.
No, do you want it on your tombstone?
No, I'm not going to have
We can have it arranged.
Okay. I think that this is the most widely known virus picture in the public, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
We saw it in Galveston.
Somebody recently, some old friend from CDC sent me an email saying if you had been given $1 for each use, you'd be rich.
We'll talk about that, because that's your second stint at CDC when you took. This is the first one.
After I was 14 years, I went to Colorado State for 5 years.
And in what capacity?
As an associate dean, and ended up as dean of the vet school for a short time. I didn't like that. So
what motivated that move?
I was usually pissed off at something.
Okay.
And Walter Dowdle came to Fort Collins and asked me to come back. And he was talking about this disease, AIDS, and that was kind of weird, that a veterinarian. And after a few years as head of virology, I was made head of the NCID, National Center for Infectious Diseases, which was the hot issue, of course, was AIDS. And the politics eventually led me to leave.
Leave Colorado.
No. Colorado was
very brief.
The only thing I did virologically while out there was I ran one of the international congresses of virology, but otherwise I was, associate dean's a good job. You get to do all the inside work, but virology called me back.
Did you know Charlie Kalischer while
Very
you were
well.
in Colorado, right?
He's my brother.
He was doing virology while you were out there as dean, right?
Well, before they all left to go to Colorado, we worked together in Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
Should we interview him on
Yes.
TWiV?
Yeah.
Yeah. I asked him once, he said, I don't have time for that
Oh, yes, he does. You just go get it.
He could be cranky, right?
No, well, that's not the right. He's a character.
He's a character.
Character.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
He said
met
to me,
him
I don't
once
have
at
time
a-
for this social
I
media
met him once
stuff.
at a Rocky Mountain meeting. And then when I told him when I was about to retire, and he said, good for you. You don't need the money anymore. You don't do anything different except during the day. If you want to go watch a baseball game, you go do that.
He does what he says is not always even what he believes.
But it sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. I had
So
to mention.
what
Charlie-
comes-
so this is Colorado Springs?
No.
Fort
Fort
Collins,
Collins.
Fort Collins, which is where we're going to be this summer.
Colorado State
Colorado
University,
State.
and CDC's Arborvirus lab is there.
Charlie is right there. No
Yeah.
reason I can't go. We can't
right.
go and do a TWiV.
Yeah.
Maybe he should be at ASV and we'll do it in front.
Maybe so.
Well, we'll look at that. They have a bat colony there now at Fort Collins.
Yeah.
And in fact, after ASV this summer, there's a bat meeting.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to that.
Well, I went to the, Charlie wrote a paper about bat viruses. It had 50 viruses on this paper. And then, so he was, invited in to deal with all the naturalists who are bat people. And NIH had a bat virus meeting here in Bethesda that was incredible because these two groups of people had, never talked to each other.
So what happens after Colorado?
Well, I went back to CDC as head of virology and built a retrovirus unit and hired Tom Folks and
so we
a
wait.
bunch of other people. And
So AIDS emerges while you're there after you go back, right? Or was it
well, I have
before?
very strong memories of, the discovery of HIV, et cetera.
Tell us some.
Well, the one I remember was that Sherman, the one who did not win the Nobel Prize, came to the United States and went to the retrovirus meeting in one of the ski resorts in Utah in the winter, and gave a paper that had the wires running night and day, and he came to CDC Atlanta from there with rumors, of what he had said. And he filled the large auditorium in Atlanta with standing room and laid out what they had done. And there was a standing ovation. It was so, people like Jim Curran and the other folks had all absolutely understood that this was the discovery. That was pretty dramatic.
So he was doing this at the Pasteur, right?
Right.
With Montagnier and Barré-Sinoussi, right?
Right.
But he didn't get any credit later
But
on.
he was the one who was giving their, that group's talk
Yeah.
in Utah.
I can imagine what an impact that would have, because this was a pretty scary time with this disease on the ramping up like this, and to be able to identify what the agent
they made an ELISA, but the proof testing of the ELISA at first was on 20 sera that CDC's Jim Curran and company had picked out. Some that were from clear AIDS cases and others from no way, a nun in Alaska or something, and so this gold standard set of 20 sera which was done blind. The French test was perfect. And nobody else had anything like that.
Now, Gallo at this time was trying to...
We had the wrong virus.
He had his own virus, yeah.
HTLV3.
So this second run at CDC was, what were the years involved?
1983 to 91.
83 to 91.
83 was, the virus was discovered in 84. So it was all front loaded.
So there's something I want to talk about because you were right in there for the 76 Ebola epidemic, right? So
right.
Where were you at the time, and what was your involvement in that?
Oh, well, that's probably the most exciting day in my CDC life. 1976.
Right. So you were still at CDC. Your first
and
run at CDC.
The containment labs, as they were mine at that time. And Carl Johnson and Patricia Webb had just been hired to branch that off and make a separate unit, which is now called special pathogens.
The containment labs at that time, we didn't have these designations P1, P2, P3, P4.
And the CDC hood was just a piece of glass with a airflow. When you did tried to test these things, with smoke or dry ice, CO2 gas, vapors, they all leaked and the air came back out. And all that.
And so,
but if, like Walter Dowdle always said, that 80% of, you can change the percent anytime you want, of containment is safe practices.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the people who were in there doing this stuff really knew what they were doing.
Right.
And I was one of the reasons that we were safe when we had Marburg in '67 was that only 3 of us were allowed into the lab, and all 3 of us knew what we were doing.
So tell me about Ebola.
So this day, the box of human bloods and tissues had come from Zaire, and Patricia Webb had opened the box, and all the tubes were broken.
Oh.
And she puts on gloves and squeezes a bit of fluid out of the cotton batting, and puts a lot of extra antibiotics in the virocell culture. And like two days later, there's some CPE, and she gives me a drop. And that's that picture.
That's where the picture's from.
That's from the first cassette.
Wow.
Wow. So is it what's the...
So that's only half the story, because I called Carl and Patricia, and I said, come and see this. But I said, wait about 10 minutes. And I went back to the hood where I had prepared the EM specimen. And I Cloroxed the hell out of her.
Yeah. So at that point, because of Marburg, you knew what a filovirus was.
I was the only one left at CDC who had worked on Marburg. Okay. The other 2 guys were gone.
So, but did you immediately recognize this as, whoa, this is a filovirus?
I said it was Marburg. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I went. Carl and Patricia came and took a look. They're all like this. And then I went into the dark room and printed. I had a wet glass plate, the negative, or a bunch of them, and put the wet stuff into the enlarger. That's not good for the, and then I had dripping wet prints, and we went up to see the director CDC, and there was this long, narrow conference room. And he's down at one end, and he says, go down to the other end, I'll be with you soon. And there's Dave Sensor, this great guy, head of CDC, a distinguished epidemiologist. He's talking with one man at the other end of this long table. Meanwhile, other people had heard that, the dripping print and all that, and most of the epidemiologists came in and got noisy. Eventually, Sensor and the other guy walked down and joined. The other guy was Sam Nunn,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
His first visit to CDC as a junior senator. So by the end of that afternoon, and I'm saying it's Marburg, and then about an hour or so later, Patricia walks in and whispers in Carl's ear, and Carl announces to the room, it's not Marburg.
What did they do?
Some serology?
Cross FA on spot slides. And by the end of that day, the WHO team to go to Zaire was all set with Carl as director.
Wow.
So how...
You didn't go. You didn't go with them, right?
No.
Okay.
How, at the point where they sent you the samples, how big was the epidemic?
Well, there's like two different stories. One, would have been the truth, which was, that there were like 400 or 500 cases. But the rumors that came back the communication was very amateur in those days. A lot of ham radios were in the circuit. And that people were dying all over the country,
I see.
So that...
And so who sent the samples?
Some of the first physicians that went to Yambuku, because in the same box there were bits of liver.
So these were U.S. physicians who went to investigate?
Oh no,
this outbreak?
the first were not Americans.
Okay.
But one of the earliest ones was Pierre Sereau, a world-class rabies guy from Pasteur, Institut Pasteur in Paris.
And so the thinking here is, this is not good. Let's have CDC have a look at this, see if they can figure out what this is.
Well, it was a WHO team, and as you know, the Belgians were there, with the
Peter Piot.
Peter Piot was there, and I think there was another Belgian. Oh, and Guido van der Geren, who was the bench virologist. The pictures of him are using a plastic Trexler lab, set up on a table in Yambuku.
Right.
Good guy.
Yeah, it's in your book. I was looking at it. I was looking at the Nipah one, because I was just there. So let's see, this would be 76, right?
Yeah.
You have this wonderful series of one-page. Oh, look, there's David Ho. He's at Columbia now,
No.
He came to my place, yeah. He left the...
That was Marty next to him.
Marty Hirsch, who was one of your trainees, right?
Ho was his student.
Steve Morris, he's at Columbia. Oh my gosh, this is like a who's who. Let's get to 76. We'll tell you how to get this.
Can anybody get up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because on my desk is the new book.
My gosh, this is dense.
Yeah.
78.
Here's the second edition.
Jim Hogle. That's amazing. Yes, Conde, look at this thing. Isn't this awesome?
Yeah,
I've never seen this.
No, I've only had it a week. I only bought a couple of copies for my family, but
So I can buy this if I want, right?
no.
No, you can't.
No?
But I
But
listened.
I'm going to it may end up being made available through ASV. That Lorena Passarelli is interested.
Let me tell you.
Oh man, it's got to be. I mean,
Well, I was worried. It was hard to find a printer, and if you go to a real publisher, they want me to fill out a whole form on every picture, and I'm not going to do that. There's 2,000 pictures in there.
as long as we're here, tell the story of this book.
Well, this is the second edition. It's been on the web for like 10 years now.
Right,
And I had a hard copy, but that company is gone to funk.
So my recollection is that at an ASV meeting some time ago, you had this slideshow going.
Yeah.
My recollection of this is that the focus is a whole bunch of pictures that are the history of virology.
there's a PowerPoint that I haven't kept it up, but it's still on that website.
But this is basically a history of virology, right? Full of pictures.
Full of pictures.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm a
it
picture guy.
Fred,
brings
this
back
is
memories
amazing.
because I know a lot of these people. I've seen them, and you get their pictures here.
Yeah, since I'm a lot older,
you
I
go
have
way
a different
back.
set.
And this is a PDF. You can find this online as a PDF at the UTMB site, right?
Right.
Yeah, so people can download. It's a low-res version, but still you can look at it, right? That's what I have here.
Yeah. That's a low res you have?
Well, you sent us a Dropbox link. That's probably a high-res link,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I'll tell you how big it is. It is...
It's 300 meg.
It is, 300 megs. That's the low-res?
Yeah.
Well, it would
The
be
ones that go to the book printer,
They're huge,
are a gigabyte,
it would be really nice to have the print version of this available.
Let me just show this to our listeners, viewers. So this is the book, and it's amazing. How many pages is this?
600.
It's full of, every page has a picture on it. And then on the back, of course, is the iconic Ebolavirus picture. Did you colorize it? Or did
Yes, but I don't like colorizing. I just get swept away by everyone else doing it. Electrons don't have color.
when did you start assembling that book? What year?
Well, the first one was like 2012, I think. So that's
You did it here in your house, right?
yeah. I use Adobe InDesign.
That's impressive.
yeah.
I'm impressed. I tried to use it. It's hard. So, all right, let's go back to, so the Ebola, I was looking for a picture which you have of the guys working at a table, and there's specimens they're dissecting. There's a whole bunch of people sitting around it. It's almost like a pathology thing. They're sitting around with microscopes.
Oh yeah.
You remember that one? And that's the one I was thinking.
Yeah.
Is that happening here or in Africa?
That was in Africa. They were. This is before the bats became the only place to look, where they would have all kinds of little creatures being ground up.
So what do you think? Now, nobody has actually isolated infectious Ebola virus from a bat. They have some sera.
Marburg, they have.
Marburg they have, but not the Ebolas, right? But you think that's good enough?
The real conservative is Tom Kajak.
Yes.
He won't say we've done it.
He did say that at the meeting.
Absolutely.
So, we need virus, right?
He is consistent.
And then he says it's very it's very expensive to go to caves and capture bats nowadays, right? You can't do it as.
It's a lot of
There's
fun,
a guy,
huh?
Jonathan Towner. You must know
good
him.
guy.
I knew him when he was a student with Bert Semler.
Oh, is that right?
And I may have been on his committee. I don't remember, but he goes in the caves and
Yeah. He's way beyond my time.
yeah.
Yeah.
He after CDC, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Ebola outbreak '76. You were there. That was your first.
So I did finish that because the punchline was that bang bang, and they stopped in Geneva to get the blessing of WHO, and off they go to Zaire, and the rest of it, is kind of the separation of the virus versus the disease. And the guys that went to Africa at that time, Joel Brayman and people like that, are really interested in the disease epidemiology, and that separation between virology and epidemiology is always going to be there.
Mm-hmm. And so, what do you think? Are we always going to have outbreaks of? And what would stop it? What can we do?
Well, that's where I thought Tom Kajak answered one of your questions in Galveston very well by saying it was the people themselves who changed their behavior.
Yeah, I remember that.
You go out and teach a little bit, and then they figure it out that this may be right, and they teach each other. And with Ebola, that what you had to do to stop transmission is pretty clear. Yeah. No more funerals, etc.
I remember that. You remember him answering?
Yeah.
Because nobody else has ever said that. It's always, the vaccine, this and that.
Right. Change people's behavior.
But he said, Tom Kajak said that to you in very few words that were just right. I should have written it down.
The current coronavirus is the same situation.
No.
You have to change your behavior. You have to stop having live meat markets, right?
Oh.
In that sense.
Yeah, but once the cat's out of the box.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course, it's too late.
Nobody's ever stopped the flu epidemic, so, where you have transmission before illness and a lot of silent infections,
Yeah.
It's going to go.
It's going to go for sure. Yeah. All right. So then now we've
We're at the
season.
second run at CDC.
And you're director. What's the name of your title again at this time?
National Center for Infectious Diseases. So I had to remember something about bacteria. And
all right. And that still exists, the NCID?
No.
It doesn't.
That there were only 3 directors. Dowdle started it. I was second, and then Jim Hughes.
Okay.
And then it was broken up because of CDC politics.
And you still had your own lab during that second
No,
run? No. So that was mostly administration.
So I just visited.
Which, that's a part of my life I don't think about. It's not that much fun.
Just visited Singapore, and they have a NCID. I think they emulate the U.S. CDC, but they have a brand new facility.
There's there must be 20 countries that use just the CDC part.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but many of them combine research with patient care, right?
But a lot of them are only epi with no labs.
Yeah.
Like the Australian one, for example, and that's not a good idea.
Second stint, you leave CDC. Why do you leave CDC the second?
Well, it was AIDS politics, and I thought that the person in that chair, had to be a physician. For over all those years, the emphasis at CDC were, including in bacteriology and mycology is a very static subject, but there's hardly ever a new one, and there was a lot of emphasis on exotics through my days. Mosquito-borne and tick-borne, the whole works.
So what comes after that second stint at CDC?
I ended up as dean at UC Davis.
What year is that now?
91.
So let's pause and talk about ASV, because ASV is founded
ASV
before
is
that.
80.
Oh yeah, 81.
So were you involved in the founding? Yes. You went to that first Chicago meeting, right?
No, I wasn't in Chicago. I had to go to Europe at that day, but I was on the first council and all the meetings in Harry Ginsberg's apartment and all that.
So you must have known Bill Yachlik,
Very
right?
well.
And so when we did the ASV TWiV with Sid Grossberg.
That was really good.
You like that?
Yeah. Sid is it was so good to see you. I haven't seen him in years,
Yeah. It was short, though. We only had an hour.
Well, he wasn't there. He wasn't there at the beginning.
Yeah.
But David Bishop was. And David Bishop took all the money from all of those first fees and bought junk bonds. And so by the time he turned it over to Sid, it was a lot of money.
It's risky, though.
Something about fiduciary responsibility,
Huh.
Different era.
So you were an officer early on for ASV?
The first council.
First council.
So you thought it was a good idea?
Absolutely. And I had kept all of my papers, which they're now in the Bancroft Library box, and by way of Lorena.
Uh-huh. You used to take care of the archives, right?
Lorena does it
Now Lorena takes care of it.
She's done a good job.
Oh, Lorena is great. Lorena's great.
All right. Maybe we'll ask Bernie Moss, about ASV, because he knew Bill Yachlik really well, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so
There would be no ASV without Bill Yachlik. He did all the work.
okay. All right, so now you were Dean's Davis, right? Dean of what school?
Veterinary medicine.
Oh, so you're back home, right?
Yeah.
In a way.
It's the number one vet school in the world. Ranked.
How do you rank a vet school?
Well, there's 2 or 3, but I used to get emails from my friend Marion Horsnick from Utrecht, which thinks it's number 1 in the world. Yeah, but UC Davis Vet School is twice as big as number 2 in the U.S.
Who's number 2?
Cornell and Penn.
So by that time, you had seen a lot of, Davis was a totally different
Absolutely.
place.
And now, since I left there in 2005, it just keeps getting better,
So you were there for how long as dean?
I did 5 years as dean, and then I stayed for another 10 years.
And did you run a lab during this period of time?
No, but one of the things I did was I put in a big fancy proposal for an academic high containment lab like Galveston.
I remember there was an ASV at Davis, I think, during the period of time that was going on. And there was a big public uproar about the notion of putting in that high containment. Because that was at a time when there were
chickened out.
that was at a time where there were proposals out, or requests for proposals, right, to build high containment labs.
And for $200 million, the proposal's pretty substantial. So I did that for Davis, but it didn't work.
They didn't get it.
Nope. And then people told me what was going on at NIH, about this. How did Boston get it? So I don't need to go into that.
So that's the same period that Boston had applied.
Yeah.
Right?
So Galveston and Boston won the prize.
They won, yes. Yeah, they were telling us
and
that
I
story,
lost.
Okay.
It's okay.
So at Davis, then you don't have a lab at this point. You're a dean, doing administrative, which we get the impression you don't really like all that much.
Not to think back to at all. Yeah.
Okay. And you were there for how many years?
So let's see. I went there in '91, and I went to Texas in 2005. So whatever that is.
That's a pretty long run. That's 14 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
I taught after I stepped down from dean. There's a famous little course that no one else would ever have heard of except a few of my friends, in viral pathogenesis. So, heavy on the biology and disease aspects, scholarly. And in a place like Davis, you'd get the pathology residents would take it, really, really deep stuff. It was very good.
So then you go to Galveston.
Yeah.
And what was the motivation for that move?
Well, I thought I should, retire because, tenure in University of California is forever. You can, and until the guilt gets you, that you're not earning your salary.
So what year is this?
2005.
2005.
So I was there for 10 years.
Okay. So you were at Galveston for 10 years.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you moved to Galveston?
I'd have
to do the math.
It's 15 years ago, and he's 85 now, so he'll be 70.
Okay, it's time to retire.
Yeah.
But you didn't really retire,
did you? Really retire.
No, and on the side, I started this stuff.
You started that in Galveston, right? Okay, and there, now, you knew Jim LeDuc was there already?
No, he came after me.
And what about...
but I've known Jim for a year, so...
Kizek wasn't there either?
No.
Did you overlap with him at CDC? Yeah, you did, right?
I think I hired him, but don't quite remember. He and...
So you created the original BSL-4 at Galveston, is that right?
No. He was applying at Davis while they were...
but no, there's a...
No, I didn't. Dave Walker was he's a rickettsiologist, Okay. And he was one of my fellows at CDC, and then he was chair of pathology. It was his idea to build Galveston.
You're talking about the Shope BSL.
Yes,
the little guy
the little
that
thing.
predates the big
Actually,
one.
I had Bob Shope's office when I went to Galveston. and I probably wrote 30 papers with Bob Shope. He was my dear friend.
So what was your...
There's a good page in here on rabies-like viruses.
What was your position at Galveston?
Professor.
Okay.
You didn't have a lab, though, right?
No.
You were just teaching and writing and thinking a lot, right?
That's it.
Talking to people.
And talking with Bob Tesh every day about the world.
That's a pretty good gig.
Yeah, it is. It's better than working for a living.
I'd like to do that for a while.
Yeah. Well, that's what you're doing now.
Yeah, but in a lab, it's kind of interfering.
The reason I got that, why I was there, was I was the only member of the IOM in Galveston. Mm-hmm. And
that's the International...
Institute of Medicine.
The National Academy of Medicine.
Okay.
And they thought must be worth something. Maybe they thought I would get other guys elected, which doesn't work like that.
So let's go back, because I interrupted. You then predated Tesh And
Oh, no, Tesh was there.
Tesh was there.
Tesh and Shope went from Yale to Galveston, some years before.
Okay.
Yeah, they brought the virus collection with them, remember?
That's right.
Which is amazing because
It
they have
is.
it all there, and that Nikos periodically pulls out pieces and looks at them under the EM. You would love to do that, wouldn't
Oh, I do, yeah. They have a Russian electron microscopist,
you? Yeah.
Seva, who is very good. And it's at its best when you get somebody like that working with someone like Tesh or Nick.
When you were there, you didn't do any EM, though, right?
Well, I've always consulted a lot.
Yeah.
People send me pictures and say, "What's this?"
I see.
Usually it's nada.
Nothing, yeah. So when we went, they showed us the pathology archive. You must have seen it in the red building.
Oh, yeah.
Old pathology
yeah.
specimens, remarkable.
Yeah.
They hired someone to actually curate it and label everything and preserve what's preservable.
They also have a great history of medicine library. Those kind of librarians, if you ever, need something.
Yeah. I bet you spent some time there.
Yeah, usually, just an email to these wonderful people that where I couldn't find something.
So then you're basically in Galveston, and then you come here. What year was that?
Is it 2015, huh?
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I've been here 4 years or whatever.
And what do you do mostly? Besides interacting with your fellow residents, do you do a lot of virology thinking and writing still?
Yeah, it's just a couple hours a day on email stuff, and then I have the OCD problem with this thing.
You find a mistake and you fix it.
There's still a lot of them.
So, I mean, the motivation that goes into doing something like that just blows my mind.
It's fun.
Yeah, we
And
do this, right?
the choices, the other people, before you guys walked in, I went down thinking you'd be right on time. And in the lobby, and 20 people were going out to get on a bus to go to a museum. And I don't do that. And I don't play bridge.
Yeah, there were a lot of people playing
A lot
cards
of people playing
down
cards.
Yeah.
Great way to pass pathogens around, seems to me.
Yeah.
Cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never thought of that.
Well,
I won't say that.
They used to do rhinovirus trials by having people play cards.
I didn't know that.
They would have one person who was infected, and you could infect volunteers because it was a mild infection. Yeah. And they would sit them at a card table and they'd study the transmission to the other card players.
Some respiratory viruses are very tough, and some aren't. And you wonder if there'd be a selective transmission of rhinos, which are kind of tough.
I have to have this book.
Well, you could get the high-res file and pay to get, Amazon will do a one-off print, won't they? If you give them a file? I think so.
I don't know.
I'll look into it, but yeah, this is a cool book.
I'm mainly, waiting for Lorena to talk to the council.
Well, I will talk to her.
But the last message I sent to Lorena was that if you order, I ordered 10.
Hey, that's Vincent Racket Yellow.
Baltimore Wimmer. I'm on a page with two famous guys. Look at that.
Only one Nobel.
If you go back there, you've got that Gary Larson cartoon with the mosquito blowing up. That's pretty good.
Where?
I know you went by there.
Yeah.
Look at this. This is a who's
There it is.
That's one of my favorites.
That's great.
See, and this was translated into Spanish by my son John and his buddies. They went to a saloon one night, and I had like 6 of these that I was going to use at a meeting in Mexico. And they had a lot of beers because you had to get it right.
Here's a cartoon of Larson where the Center for the Study of Viral Pathology in the broken jar, and there are people, the guy's going, uh-oh. For 14 years, the viral pathology branch was the name of your lab at CDC. Do you miss CDC?
Yeah. Well, only that you wish you were younger or something, because it would be, if you look at it the wrong way, it's just a big government institution now.
Yeah.
But it was, all those people in virology, we were absolutely the outliers. But, Olin Q and polio, those Mark Palanch and Steve C.
So when you look back on all this,
I hired 5 graduates from Roland Ruckert, who had been trained by Roland Ruckert.
So I know Palanch was one of them. Q? Who else?
Betty Robertson, and the guy that's a big shot now at CDC, worked with Roger Glass and Terex in diarrhea viruses. I blank on names.
No, it's okay. We got it. It's a different place now, I think, from when you were there.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's expanding more and more. And
I really don't know a lot about what it's really like down.
Have you visited lately at all?
Once.
Yeah. Palanch is still there, but he's going to retire, I hear.
He's a wonderful guy.
I think regulation makes it difficult.
Yeah.
Regulations make it difficult to work there. I
think if, Kizak company will tell you the same, that regulators, they have so much power. They're actually unexperienced at never having done anything themselves. They can go to a school and become a safety officer or et cetera.
Yeah, I have one of my former students works at CDC and
Oberst.
Steve Oberst.
No.
Oberst.
Yeah. Good guy. Too.
Oh, that was Bert Flanagan's student.
Right.
Sorry. I just saw Oberst last week.
Yeah. No, there was one more from Roland.
Was Oberst from? No, Oberst.
No, you said
Flanagan.
not. But I know there were 5. Anyway.
They spend a lot of time dealing with regulations.
Yeah.
Filling out forms.
So do we, in academics even.
Yeah, I don't anymore.
You don't, but it's a pain. And I think it impedes progress in the name of safety. But I think, as you said, and this was perfect, 80% of safety is the operator. You can have the safest thing in the world, but if they don't know what they're doing.
That's right.
Right? And that's just not, the administrators do not consider that.
I consider that Walter Dowdle's, lesson number 1.
So you got a paper here called Historical Perspective, What Constitutes Discovery of a New Virus?
Yeah.
So what does constitute discovery of a new virus?
Well, you have to read that paper. No, I wrote that because I was getting upset on the 40th anniversary of the discovery of Ebola. Some people were rewriting history in their own name. I mean, real first person erroneous stuff. And so the last paragraph in that little paper is about, I used like 10 different examples of, the roots of discovery.
Okay.
And the last one was Ebola, which is why I wrote it, because there were people, that was kind of offensive to me that Patricia Webb was being moved over. And also some of the epidemiologists were trying to fuzz discovery of a disease versus discovery of a virus. I would never touch discovery of disease. It's nebulous.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it says here that I think I'm looking at the abstract that the person who discovered the virus should be in some kind of archive so that it's remembered, right?
That's what I say.
Currently, it doesn't exist. Yeah, it's true.
But I think unless their name is offensive, then what they name it ought to stick.
Yeah, but that's not the case, right? We either have sin nombre or
the worst is going to be the new coronavirus.
Yeah. Well, the others don't have anyone's name associated with them.
No,
right?
well, those one of the old rules was no people's
people,
names,
yeah,
except for grandfather
strains, except for strains like the Urbani SARS strain, right?
Oh, strains, nobody cares about it, but the
just us.
Every reference center's archive collection of the Tesh arbovirus collection of thousands of virus isolates.
Yeah.
There's all different numbering systems.
What do you think about having a virus just having sequence and no virus isolate? Is that?
No, I agree with the guys who browbeat you over it with that in Galveston.
You like the virus isolate, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do like to, stick mice and monkeys and see what happens.
So this caught my attention as well. See if I can wind you up with this one. A paper called Virus Species Polemics. 14 senior virologists opposed a proposed change in the ICTV definition of a virus species.
That's Mark Van Regenmortel, my dear friend.
Right, because he's the guy who wrote the original species definition, right?
And I actually, in the book, most of it's about you and what you wrote in Fields.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, because I came into that cold.
But you ended up with a rather positive, neutral, and what's going on now where ICTV is, has gone to hell.
Okay.
So, I was president of ICTV, so, I am a life member, but I have nothing to do with it now because I can't stand the nomenclature. The classification system is fine. Mm-hmm. We know what a genus and the idea that ICTV does not care about anything below species, I can't stand that either. The word poliovirus has disappeared.
What did we have now?
It's enterovirus C or something like that. True.
Yeah, there's no room for polio.
Because it's now
below species.
Below a species, yeah.
So here's another paper I found that this must have been, this is 1979. Where were you in 1979? Were you in Davis or still at CDC?
I was in Fort Collins.
Fort Collins. So this is control and eradication of exotic viruses affecting man. So this is 1979. So that's that's 40 years ago.
I have no idea what that says, though.
Okay, fine. I was thinking that was relevant.
Well, it was probably the CDC perspective.
Okay.
That it's not good enough to just study something. You have to control disease.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about your website here. And I noticed there's a coronavirus picture, isn't it?
2290.
You took that. Did you see this? It's beautiful.
Oh yeah.
That's somebody else colorized it.
I think this has been going around.
One of the tricks. I wrote this up somewhere, but I can't remember where. 90% of the spikes have already fallen off. Mm-hmm. The coronaviruses lose their spikes very easily, and I did some mouse hepatitis stuff where I was doing. It's enteric strain. Yep. And the, in the agonal mouse, just go in and get a bit of intestinal content. Mm-hmm. And those particles are jammed with spikes.
Did you take a picture of that?
Yeah, but it's not the best. One of the best ones is, the NIH coronavirus website with the new virus. Yeah. They're scanning pictures. There's one of them that if you blow it up, you can see that it looks like fur on the on them. There's so many spikes.
Well, let's see if we can find that. So would they have it in the? I didn't see that. Did you see that?
I don't know. I don't know a lot about how that's organized at NIH because in most cases, you never can find who did the work. There must be a central EM lab.
I want to find that because I think they did publish a few the other day saying here's the first isolate that we've done.
And that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. But I know it's the last picture in that little group.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't find it. But yours is. I was just looking at this when you compare it to influenza virus, how tightly packed those spikes are.
Because they don't fall off.
They don't fall off. So HIV is very sparse. Do they fall off or they're always sparse? Do you know?
There's not a lot of negative stain HIVs.
Anyway, so there's this website, Virus Images Foundations of Virology. So you have a lot of pictures here. You have your book, a PDF, but you have a lot more. You have slides, right?
I haven't been keeping that up, though. But they're still there.
People can use these for presentations.
I used to have a hit meter, to know if anyone was using it. Do you have a hit meter on your website?
I don't have the meter, but I have a separate place I can go look and see.
You can tell how many people look?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see.
Because I had to also, the hit meter would even say how long people stayed, and then you know if they're downloading or...
Then you have a lot of other stuff here. You have various things you've written besides the book. And then you have papers. These are your papers, I presume.
Well, those were papers that were not in PubMed.
I see. And one of them is discoverers and discoveries. It's a huge table of timeline.
That's a little out of what do you call it? Table of contents of this thing is better, because that's a real timeline.
Wow.
It's a sort of what's in here, right, though, in this Word document?
But that's a lot shorter.
It's shorter, Yeah, that's amazing. Do you periodically tweak this or not anymore? Let's see.
It's accurate.
It goes right up to what year here? 2021, global emergency. The new coronavirus.
No, I didn't put that in. But
what is that? Polio eradication initiative.
People saying that's not going to happen, and I hate to believe that.
It depends on people's resolve.
That's right. Public will.
Right? It's
more
doable.
than 100 vaccinators been killed.
That's a problem. India shows it can be done. That was the hardest country
That's right.
to eradicate, and I think they showed. Anyway, this website, we'll put links to this because people should look at it.
Oh, yeah.
I remember years ago on TWiV, you picked his slides as a pick once, remember?
Right.
So you discovered them a long time ago. Yeah.
Well, I remember Fred at I think it was an ASV meeting where you had a table set up and you had the PowerPoint on the table. And me and my buddies stood
a big
there.
Screen,
stood there for hours looking at these slides go by. It was amazing.
I remember that. But not everyone stopped.
I got totally distracted.
There's people who have visual cortex and those who don't.
Do you ever wish you could go back and work in a lab?
Yeah, but that's hard to do.
What would you do?
No, I mean, I remember asking Dowdle if I could go back, and I think he had thought about it himself.
Would you do EM?
Yeah, there was a time when I first got to Galveston where I had cataracts, and I think it was somebody asked me to go review a set of H&Es, from one of these bad viruses. I think it was C.J. Peters had a whole bunch of good stuff, and I couldn't see well enough. So I have, plastic lenses, and my eyes are better than ever. And so, by the time I got cataracts done, I never went back and looked at those slides. But I could do it now.
Well, if anybody needs an electron microscopist, here he is, for viruses anyway.
Yeah.
Is there anything in your career that we didn't touch on that you think merits discussion? We hit on a lot. We went over it. Did we miss? I'm sure we missed a lot, but it's just something that you think is needs to be said.
Well, you're supposed to talk about the future, and I don't know what where we are on the curve of the science of virology. That people saying, it's just beginning, and others that the golden years have passed. And if you stick strictly to discovery, there's a little graph done by the folks at CDC Fort Collins about a time graph with discovery, and there's a big bump when the Rockefeller Foundation was paying people to go out and find new arboviruses. But when you take that out of it, there's just a gentle curve about discovery. But virology is not that much about basic discovery anymore. Here we have the new coronavirus is a big discovery.
Viruses aren't going away.
Yeah, but most of the enterprise is on, I don't know what you want to call second or third generational divergence from the original discovery. Mm-hmm. So if you want to write a history of virology, you'd have to include all of the upstream stuff.
Right.
That'd be a lot of. I couldn't do that.
Charlie Calisher wrote a history from his viewpoint.
Yeah.
Have you seen? You must have seen it, right?
Yeah.
Something about a veil.
Right.
I can't remember.
That's a yellow fever quote.
Is it? Yeah.
It's from Walter Reed, I think.
Ah, okay. Well, I mean, from my view, we don't put enough money into virology. But I would say all of life sciences is well, maybe not all. Cancer and diabetes and those things get a lot of money.
Yeah. There's, Dave Morin's over
I do.
NIH, and he stumbled just within the last 3 months into this eruption of interest in the history of arbovirology, and they were going to feature these oral histories. Uh-huh. Well, I wrote to him saying, that we had a bunch of oral histories. Yeah. I did one of them. I interviewed Telford Work.
Right.
And I don't think, and we had monitors set up at a Tropical Medicine Society meeting where you could go in and look at any one of the founding fathers, with 2 hours of videotape.
Yeah.
The talking head. And no, I can remember at that meeting, I think it was down here at one of the Washington hotels, and no one was there. That no one was, prepared to spend 2 hours just listening to Telford Work ruminate. So
Morin sent me this slide deck, right? Something old, something new, and it's a series of pictures. And he says, "What do all these people have in common?" He sent it to me. He said, "Take the thing and see what they all had in common." And I suspect they all had polio.
Oh, he didn't tell you the answer?
He didn't tell me the answer, but I haven't gone through it yet. But it's a whole thing about historic polio.
Oh, that's good. Oh, I have that one. I have the ultimate copy of that picture.
Oh, yeah?
I got it.
Who is that?
That's...
Landsteiner?
Yeah. Nobel for... blood groups.
Blood groups. So he isolated polio. He was the first guy.
Great stuff.
Yeah, Morins and I have been communicating a bit recently.
So I haven't heard from Dave in several weeks. I think he got overwhelmed. He had hundreds of responses.
Yeah.
For people that wanted to help.
Well, they're overwhelmed with the coronavirus now.
Yeah.
They all have to wear Army uniforms until it's over. So Morins was at a meeting, an AFM meeting. That's where I saw him last week.
Oh, yes, he has to wear his public.
He was wearing fatigues with the boots, the blue. It wasn't a dress uniform, it was fatigues. And he had the big black boots, and they're all the public health service people, right?
Yeah, he's a commissioned officer.
Yeah. You know David Morins, right?
No, I don't.
Tony Fauci's right-hand person.
Okay.
Right? Is that a fair statement?
There was some times where I was a commissioned officer for a few years, and where you had to wear a uniform on Wednesday, except in virology building, you went in the back door and we didn't bother. And there was one uniform on a hanger next to the official photographer. And, one size fits all, where you'd get a picture taken once a year, in uniform. You had to wear a white shirt that day.
That's funny.
But I think Dave likes to wear the uniform.
You think? Yeah. Well, there were a number of people at the meeting. Some of them had.
He's an 06, so he's got a lot of stripes.
Some of them had dress, suits, but then some people, both men and women, had blue and boots, the black big high boots, right? I don't know why the difference. Anyway, you have anything else?
I'm done.
You're good. All right.
So where do you think? I had one other. I did have one other. I was thinking this is where I get to ask you a question. You guys, that in not marketing, but featuring the world of medical and veterinary virology, There might be a signature virus, a signature disease that's used, as a flag on the flagpole. For me, it would have historic elements. And so I think there's some candidates. So yellow fever virus, yellow fever.
Yeah. This is why it's on the cover there, yeah.
The previous edition had rabies and Pasteur on the cover. Foot and mouth disease, I agree with Van Regenmortel, it was the first virus discovered. Smallpox virus. Yeah. Jenner and incredible mortality. Polio virus, Salk, Sabin, and the rise of molecular biology. And then I put down tobacco mosaic virus, but even though it's I don't follow plant virology. So if you had to pick one
of those,
or anything else, I'm not sure the word signature is right, but as a reminder to others, that this is one way to enter into the world of medical virology.
Well, I think if you want something that is recognizable by us as well as people out there, and it kind of signifies a new way of looking at viruses and studying them, new kinds of approaches, it's Ebola virus. It's iconic, it's recognizable. Your picture, it's you. Plus,
it's really interesting
it's
stories.
A new thing. Yeah. The story's amazing, coming out of nowhere. And we now know that.
I didn't think of it.
We now know that this has happened over and over throughout history, but that crystallized it. I mean, it happened with Lassa, but we didn't really get it. It was just Ebola. It caught the world's attention because it was so serious. So I think Ebola.
When you talk about spillovers or outbreaks or anything like that
Ebola,
in the general public, Ebola is the first thing on their minds. Yeah. And your picture is. My guess is that more than any other picture of a microorganism, that picture is identifiable in the public's mind. Now look at that.
And I didn't think of it.
You can buy T-shirts, jewelry.
I have ties.
Everything.
It's cost me a fortune, because I've had to buy ties for all my family.
Yeah, it's amazing. Does people living here know that you made the iconic photo? Probably not. Few. No, I think that's remarkable, and I think that virus crystallizes.
Well, that's the end of my question, because instead of narrowing it down, you've added.
I think those are good viruses because each for different reasons. But
the problem is that the lay public, I don't think really have a connection with something like smallpox. I agree with you that historically, I mean, the Jenner, whole story of that, and Jenner, and the fact that it was such a horrible thing to live with.
What percentage of children died in England in 1700?
I mean, it's amazing. You could count on your children getting this horrible disease, and with a 30% mortality rate. It was just awful. And to eradicate that is amazing, but nobody nowadays knows about it. They don't identify.
Yeah, they don't identify. Foot and mouth doesn't make it because it's mostly an economic.
Yeah. And I thought of, for your list, I thought flu, okay? But, most people go, flu, that's like a bad cold. I mean, they don't understand that you could die from this, okay? And who knows? Maybe the coronavirus will be
another flu. So I talked to a reporter.
I could have put flu on the list, too.
I talked to a reporter. She said, if there were a vaccine for this tomorrow, do you think people would take it? I said, tomorrow, yes. Next year, no.
No, yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Next year, it's going to be old news, and it'll just come back like another influenza, and that's it. That's the way it goes.
Well, it's really hard to do population-based vaccination of adults. The influenza statistics prove that.
Easier to get kids, right, before school.
Yeah. Brazil's good at that. Vaccination day. They kind of invented that.
Everyone in the business would wish that there was another way than prohibiting kids from going to school, because you really want to get them younger.
Right.
Oh, I
There's
think
a lot of measles transmission beforehand.
we could put it in food and have everyone eat it.
Oh, okay.
Harmless, that would be. Hillary Koprowski used to.
This is
He told me.
Texas A&M.
He told me once his banana that I'm eating, if it had a vaccine in it, it would be perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you know Hillary?
I didn't. Yeah. You know, he had a big rabies name.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
he was a tough guy.
Okay, let's wrap up this episode of TWiV. You can find the notes, links to this amazing book and all the things that Fred Murphy are doing, microbe.tv/TWiV. If you have any questions or comments, TWiV@microbe.tv. And if you like what we do, consider supporting us. Go to microbe.tv/contribute. Our guest today, Fred Murphy. We've been in Bethesda, Maryland, and what a remarkable career. It's been our privilege to talk with you about it. Thank you.
Lots of fun. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Rich Condit is a emeritus professor, University of Florida, Gainesville, currently residing in Austin, Texas. Thank you for coming out here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vincent. It's always a great time, and this has been a special day. It's great.
And I am Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.ws. I want to thank ASV and ASM. That's the American Society for Virology and the American Society for Microbiology for their support of TWiV, and Ronald Jenkins for his music. This episode of TWiV was recorded, edited, and posted by me, Vincent Racaniello. You've been listening to This Week in Virology. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. Another TWiV is viral.